Welcome to our study of Jakob Mipham's Sword of Wisdom, Jakob Leschly. And as always, kindly recognizing the value of what we're doing here in terms of understanding what in fact afflicts all sentient beings, what we call ignorance, in that sense that all sentient beings are ultimately innocent and yet, due to ignorance, perpetuate a cycle of suffering that we call samsara. And our wish with this study is to be there for sentient beings to remedy this condition of suffering. So we're presently studying this text. Last night in my dream, I was actually sort of talking a lot about this. I should have recorded it, if only one could record the dreams. I had a lot of profound things to say about the topic, how we should understand truth, how we can validate truth, how truth, you could say, exists in our cultural discourse and whatnot. A lot of really important points. I don't know if I can remember any of these anyway. It's kind of interesting. But so you've been very much on my mind. Anyway, with regards to the text then, we're looking at a text by Jakob Mipham Rinpoche, who I would emphasize was a sage more than anything. And we were very indebted to Jakob Mipham Rinpoche as somebody who clarified the Buddhist teaching to an extent that really brings together so many different strands of understanding that exist across the various Buddhist traditions. This is really more the topic of what I'm going through on the Thursday nights. But presently then, we have this you could say long song of substantiating how we can validate our knowledge. And it's in 104 verses. And this is really about us having confidence in what we're doing in terms of the path. And just like we in the sciences, we validate our knowledge through what we can trust as valid in terms of what we can observe and validate in various ways through reasoning, and also through trustworthy, you could say, authorities. Then likewise also with regards to our reality, we can understand it. It is possible for us to understand it. And from the Buddha's teaching on awakening, we have a remarkable path that can actually extract us from confusion. You could say there's two styles in which the mind can construct itself. And one is actually not a construction, that's the original condition of the mind. That's what we refer to as the primordial ground, which when this is known, we call enlightenment, but when we fail to know it, this is what we call samsara. And the Buddha, he taught a path of investigating reality, or rather investigating our assumptions about reality, seeing through what is delusional and uncovering this primordial ground that is unconfused. But for us to work with that path and to genuinely have faith in it, to really understand what exactly we're doing, it's very helpful for us to operate within a confidence that the perspectives, for example, when we say all phenomena are dependently arisen, which is something that we look at a lot, that also means that they cannot be grasped the way that we ordinarily grasp them. And so there's all the time insights in the Buddhist teaching that we are cultivating. The Buddha wants us to see something, and the Buddha wants us to sort of go have an aha moment and say, oh yeah, this makes sense. And that is where we need valid cognition, not just that the Buddha says, well, you know, everything's impermanent, and we just say, yes, sir. We actually can see the Buddha encourages us to actually look for ourselves and say, isn't it true? Anything that's composite is impermanent. Isn't it true? Anything that has dependently arisen is actually something conditioned. It doesn't exist unconditionally. The perceptions that we have of reality, they're different depending on who is seeing it. These kind of things make us go, wow, yeah, it's true. And that's where we gain confidence. So that's what we call epistemology, or pramana in the Buddhist tradition, sema in Tibetan, and this is very, very, this is very valid. So okay, let's look at we'll just look at we'll look at the text itself. So we're looking at the main topic really of the entire work is what we call the two truths, and that is truth as it exists for us in our perception, very real, ordinary truth, and yet there's something beyond the appearance, and that's what we need to understand. So we have the appearances, the way that we perceive things ordinarily, from our point of view. Then, some things are good, some things are bad, but we can also understand that that is very much our subjective take. So while it's true, it's what we call relative truth. On the other hand, reality existing without our projections and confusion, abiding as it is, this is what we call absolute truth. And this is, of course, where we're out of whack. We're not aligned with reality. And the scope of the path is really to eliminate what it is that obscures us. So we essentially understand that we presently abide within what we call relative truth, but we wish to understand absolute truth. So we have a few definitions of the two truths here, and we are coming at the two truths from different ways: the essence of the two truths, the definitions of the two truths. Now we're looking at the characteristics of the true truth. So Khenpo Palden Sherab then comments, and I'll just the root verse itself that we're commenting on is: the Dharma taught by the Buddhas is completely based on the two truths, the worldly relative truth and the supreme absolute truth. So here in terms of the characteristics of the true truths, then Khenpo Palden Sherab he says, third, as for their characteristics, the relative truth is characterized by phenomena that are not beyond the realm of the mind and cannot withstand analysis. So that's relative truth. Let's just hold on to that a moment, because there's two key terms here: not beyond the realm of the mind. Now, mind here is understood as the ordinary dualistic mind that we operate from. And that's what we essentially would say this is the condition of delusion. And when we say it cannot withstand analysis, that means everything that this ordinary mind perceives, which it solidifies, if we analyze it, we actually see that there's nothing essentially there. This is the deconstructive analysis that at this point, I think you would have been exposed to this a few times. I see here's my hand, and yet it's made up of many different components that again are made up of components that are composed of further, you could say, further components. And we can break that down until finally we understand that all of these, what we impute as the basis for what we call a hand, in fact, we cannot find anything. And so that's where we say there's not as if the hand is many different things, nor is it one thing. And we understand that all phenomena are like that. There's not anything that has any ultimate reality beyond just the label that we're attributing. And that's, of course, where we arrive at what we refer to as emptiness, but also which we should understand as really just a greater openness. This is where our solidification dissolves. We cannot pigeonhole reality. So we already know that. We know that we can't pigeonhole people. We can't pigeonhole our reality. We know that kind of thing. But here we're just taking it further, and that's what we refer to as analysis. And that's what in Tibetan it's called Döndam Chöche Kirikpa. And it really means the absolute analysis, the analysis that goes all the way. So that's, we would say, anything that this mind constructs is, if we analyze it, it disappears before our eyes. We won't be able to see the forest for the trees, that sort of thing. So there's a text called the Heruka Galpo Tantra that states, being fallible and the objects of the mind, these are the general characteristics of the relative. So basically saying the general characteristics of this relative truth is that it is constructed by the mind and has no reality. The absolute truth is characterized by the true nature that transcends the mind. In the true nature, all concepts are pacified. Now, just yesterday I was talking with a friend, and this friend was saying, but what can we then see? What is it that we're going to be seeing? And the thing is, we're not going to see a thing. The mind, the ordinarily mind, it operates with the idea that there is a thing which we then see. And that's how we would say, ah, now I know something. Well, that applies to relative truth. But absolute truth is the very absence of us actually objectifying phenomena as such. It's not about seeing something. It's rather about discovering how phenomena don't have any inherent existence. That you could say is one way of getting at it. And then there is an inconceivable quality of openness that comes from that. We'll look more at that, but it is, as is being said here, it is that which transcends the mind. It's not the ordinary mind. And this needs to be experienced. And that's where, in the Buddhist teaching, we generate wisdom on account of some study, but mainly on account of experience, integrating with our experience. And that's what we call the wisdom of meditation, the prajna. So the root wisdom of the middle way, from Nagarjuna, it says, it is not known through something other, so it is peace. It is not non-conceptual and not the different objects. It is not fabricated through conceptual constructs. Sorry, I'll start over again. It is not known through something other, so it is peace. It is non-conceptual and not the different objects. It is not fabricated through conceptual constructs. These are the characteristics of suchness. So we need to settle with that key term, it is non-conceptual, and understand that this will be something that cannot be understood as an object of the mind. This is how we right now should approach the notion of the absolute truth. But we can also understand that the relative way that we construct things, the relative way that we label things is flawed. And in a way we can say the absolute truth is when we begin to cotton on to how our conceptual constructs, they are really just that, relative conceptual constructs. And that's already where we begin to understand that our understanding of reality is relative. Already understanding that and not asserting absolute validity to it, understanding that phenomena don't have inherent existence, that's already beginning to go in the direction of absolute truth. So then we have the classification of the true truth. Fourth, there are two classifications, the relative truth and the absolute truth. The Sutra of the Meeting of Father and Child states, knower of the world, there are two paths to your truth. You did not hear this elsewhere, it is your knowledge. These two are the relative truth and the absolute truth. There is no third truth whatsoever. So in that there's no third truth, meaning either we're seeing things properly for what they are, or we're not. And that is where relative truth is, where we're operating within the delusional projection that is true for us relatively, but it's not ultimate truth. And that's where there is then reality properly seen, which is then the scope of the Buddha. And this is where then where it says this is not something that was just picked up as a dogma, but this is something that the Buddha owned. This is something that the Buddha truly experienced. So Khenpo Palden Sherab, he says, Sherab Palden, he says the relative truth has two categories, the correct and the incorrect. Now, the correct relative is the objects that appear to the mind through the unmistaken six senses, and knowledge of the words and terms that follow what worldly people consider true and false. Okay, so this is simply just where we know something. There's there's 1,000 grams to a kilo, and that's correct. To say that there's 1,001 grams to the kilo is mistaken. Simple as that. So that's simply just having you being at your full senses, then what we can understand what is true and false. The incorrect valid truth is what appears to someone with defective faculties, like visions of falling hairs. So there's this condition of ophthalmia where we perceive things that are not actually there. So then we have, what is it again? I think Jayananda's The Two Truths, which state, although they appear similar, because some of them can perform functions and others cannot perform functions, there are the categories of the correct and the incorrect. These form the categories of the relative. So of course, when we get things right, then everything runs smoothly. When we are mistaken, yes, then it is that things don't function so well. The absolute also has two categories. The expressible absolute, which accords with the ordinary mind, and the inexpressible absolute, which transcends the ordinary mind. And this is very important because sometimes we'll hear, the idea that, oh, shunyata, or emptiness, oh, I don't want to know about it because one day I'll understand it. Until then, I don't want to know. And this comes sort of from leftover from perhaps a religious, it's kind of a laziness, but it's also just the idea that, oh, we could never understand these things. These things are beyond us, And it is actually belongs to laziness. It's sort of slightly just not caring, slightly self-deprecatory, and essentially not trusting our own potential. But what we do talk about when we talk about the absolute is that, yes, we can understand it logically. That's what we're doing here. We're approaching it in understanding how dependent phenomena that cannot be grasped. Already there is the expressible absolute, which accords with the ordinary mind. This we can understand. And that's why teachings like Madhyamika, Prajna, Paramita are taught. But of course, then there's the realization, and that's different. That's the actual experience, and that transcends the ordinary mind. So that's why we talk then about wisdom and the realization of wisdom. So the adornment of the middle way, the Madhyamika Alamkara states, since it accords with the ultimate, it is called the absolute. In reality, there is freedom from the hosts of conceptual constructs. So again, this is not something that can be known conceptually, but this is what then you could say is being in alignment with reality. So this is what we strive towards. This is the nature, our true nature, that we are failing to recognize. So we're presently not in accord with the ultimate. The path leads us to accord with reality as it is. Now, the purpose of the two truths. Fifth, in relation to the purpose of the two truths, then states, those who understand the classification of the two truths are not confused about the words of the Buddha. Since all of them have accumulated merit, they will go to the far shore of perfection. So that is where we understand that the Buddha on one hand would say, avoid negative actions, embrace what is wholesome and so forth. And in other teachings, the Buddha would say there is ultimately no good, no bad. And that's where on one hand, the Buddha is relating to the confused mind that needs to have the conditions for realization. And on the other hand, there is the person that, due to having some degree of wisdom, is able to understand how the absolute nature exists. Then there are teachings on the absolute nature, absolute truth. So in this way, the various teachings that we have from the Buddha, sometimes they are, you could say, according to relative truth, sometimes according to absolute truth. And the Master Chandrakirti says, emptiness is the profundity, and the other qualities are the vastness. If one understands the way of profundity and vastness, one will obtain these qualities. And that is where we have teachings that are particularly about understanding the actual nature or essence of phenomena, which we call emptiness. And then there's also, you could say, the phenomenology of all the various appearing objects, both within samsara and nirvana. So that's what we then refer to as vastness. So sometimes we associate this with particular teachings such as the Madhyamika is more about the profundity, and we would say the Yogacarya, and the teachings on the third turning, they're more about the vastness, all the qualities, the characteristics of samsara and nirvana. So if one understands the ways of profundity and vastness, one will obtain these qualities. So if we sort of know what direction we're heading in, then we will, you would say, achieve ownership of these qualities. Okay. Okay. Now, chapter 4 coming up. Now we're going to primarily now look at, this is also something that we presently have been looking at in the context of the studies. Actually, several of our studies, they're so, you say, overlapping. Both of, I mean, the Monday study, which is very much about the tenets, the sort of various ways that insight is approached in the Buddhist traditions from various angles, what we call the 4 or 5 tenets. And then particularly actually in the Saturday study of Treasury of Precious Qualities, we're presently actually looking at interdependent origination. So there's, I put up in the resource folder for this course, I put a few things that pertain to that, could be helpful. Anyway, so next is the second section of the main topic. The 2 types of reasoning that comprehend the 2 truths. So this has 2 parts, a brief overview of the 2 types of valid cognition and a detailed explanation of the 4 types of reasoning. So right now, the main topic of this whole book are the 2 truths. But we're now going to be looking at some 2 types of valid cognition, and then we're going to be looking at 4 types of ways in which we establish this valid cognition. So the root text here says, if one wants to know the nature of the 2 truths with a mind that ascertains them unerringly, one should establish the good, clear eyes of the 2 types of flawless valid cognition. So that's where, for us to understand this, then we need to be clear and have a confident understanding of the knowledge and the conclusions that we arrive at with regards to reality. So an overview of the 2 types of valid cognition. If one wants to know with unerring certainty the nature of the 2 truths, the relative truth and the absolute truth, which are the topic to be comprehended, one must establish the 2 types of unmistaken, flawless valid cognition. These are the valid cognition that investigates. These are the valid cognition that investigates conventional reality and the valid cognition that investigates ultimate reality. I think the good thing is you guys can't hear this, so there's some little bit of noise happening here, but I think we're good. So these 2 are supreme. So one is that understands our relative experience, the other is that enables us to get a grip on what we mean with ultimate reality. So these 2 are supreme. They are like having 2 good, clear eyes that see with certainty. The reason that these 2 need to be established is that all phenomena are included within the 2 truths, and it is impossible to realize anything greater than the truth related with the way things really are. So this is the scope of what we are investigating here. We are looking at the way things actually are. Therefore, in order to bring about correct comprehension, valid cognition and Madhyamika philosophy are said to be like the 2 lion heads joined at the neck. So the two approaches that we have here, really operating in tandem, is valid cognition, pramana, and Madhyamika. And this is something that Mipham Rinpoche particularly emphasized. It's like when you have two lions sitting, well, it says the neck entwined, Singajinyal, I think it's called in Tibetan. But basically, back to back, you can see everything. And here then, one is that understands valid cognition in terms of understanding according to the way that we, with the mind, the ordinary mind, understand and validate our knowledge. And then the Madhyamika that actually shows us what is beyond the ordinary mind. So these two work beautifully together. So that's the overall theme. Now, as far as the valid cognition goes, there is then the 4 reasonings that we apply, as well as what we call the 4 reliances and 8 treasures of confidence that is then going to be discussed here in this context. Khenpo Shilapalden says, next there will be a detailed explanation of the 4 reasonings as that which does the comprehending, the 4 reliances as the way of the way the 4 reasonings function, and the 8 great treasures of confidence as the result of comprehension. So since there's a few sort of enumerations here, I just thought to go over these. Let's just have it here. 4 principles of reasoning. So this is what we're going to be looking at, and that is essentially operating with cause and effect. And the last one, it then takes us beyond that. But these are the principle of causal efficacy, the Jache Kirikpa, the principle of dependency, Tepe Rikpa, the principle of nature, Chunyi Kirikpa, and the principle of establishing a proof, Tetup Kirikpa. So these again, they are ways in which we validate truth. And this is something that we operate with in the ordinary world as well. As we are, in general, go about our life, we understand things on the basis of how does this actually work, and how can we actually ascertain our knowledge. And there, in one way or another, we're looking at how things are functioning, which are the first 3, and then the last one provides a greater perspective in terms of how things, you could say, ultimately exist. So we'll be looking at that in some detail. And then there's the 4 reliances, and these are just presently, we're just referring to these, and that is something that I think many are familiar with from the Buddhist teaching in general. Rely on the message of the teacher, not on his personality. Yeah, goes without saying. Yeah, we're not about how do you say? Like Thomas Aquinas Rinpoche always sort of, you know, pokes a little bit of fun at this tendency to be sycophantic, to look at the guru as somebody like, oh, the guru, which is great in terms of when it's that genuine openness and trust. So it's not about just being, you could say, the teacher meeting our expectations as being somebody who's conforming with what we appreciate in terms of our, you could say, ordinary expectations. But the teacher represents that which truly embodies truth. So that's where the teacher is someone who is sublime, extraordinary, yet is a teacher, somebody who is teaching us something. So we're not fixating on the teacher, we're not fixating on the teacher's personality, just like when we have the image of the Buddha pointing to the moon, we don't fixate on the finger, but the Buddha is actually pointing to something, to the moon, to the relief from samsara. And then the second one is rely on the meaning, not just on the words. Rely on the real meaning, not the provisional one. So again, like we said before, in the Buddhist teachings, there's various teachings, and some are what we call provisional. They help us understand reality on the basis of our present reality, but they really are what we call expedient teachings. They are provisional teachings. That's where we need to understand They're good for us presently, but there is the real meaning behind, rather there's teachings which address the real meaning. And finally, rely on your wisdom mind, not on your ordinary mind, your ordinary judgmental mind. So again, here we need to distinguish between, you say, wisdom, prajna, and the ordinary confused mind. And I'm just going to read then it talks about the result of this, and then the 8 treasures of confidence. And somebody asked last time about these, and I'm certainly not familiar with these, but anyway, just for the exercise, these are of course reflecting qualities that come from a sublime being's great realization. So these are then treasure of recollection, treasure of intelligence, treasure of realization, treasure of retention, treasure of confidence, treasure of dharma, treasure of bodhicitta, and treasure of accomplishment. So these are then what will be, these are what are going to be, these are what we're going to be covering. In terms of the 4 reasonings, the first 3 reasonings will be explained together, and the reasonings for a valid proof will be explained separately. The first 3 reasonings will be explained by means of a general teaching on the interdependence of appearances. This will be followed by individual explanations of the reasons of cause, effect, nature, and the 3 reasonings will be summarized. So we're presently going to be looking at particularly how things function in terms of the situation of dependent arising and cause and effect. So the heading here is the general explanation of the first 3 reasonings through interdependent appearances. So the Khenpo says, for the general teaching on the interdependence of appearances, the root text says, no matter how things appear, they arise interdependently. Nothing independent appears. This would be like a lotus appearing in the sky. So again, we understand how everything that we perceive really exists on the basis of just being a web of causes and conditions. And there's no reality other than that. The labels and the solidification that we associate with these phenomena, that's entirely our doing. But the phenomena themselves don't have any reality other than just being a play of causes and conditions. But that's where we understand that these phenomena, even though we would say they have no reality, they also appear in the way that they do on the basis of causes and conditions. And that's why we understand that our reality is so flexible, and it's also there where we can understand how we can work with our reality. The present experience of discomfort, we can change that with an experience of bliss. And in this way, phenomena, the way that we relate to them, they're not stuck in being one way or another. We can create the causes for happiness, and we can avoid the causes for suffering. So this is where we depart from this, you could say, victim mentality of saying, well, this is how circumstances are. And yes, we would say circumstances, they appear due to particular causes and conditions. And yes, as far as the present moment is concerned, yes, then what is experiencing now is due to causes from the past. But at the same time also, we understand how phenomena exists as a web of causes and conditions. We can shape our reality. So that's where the future, we could say, to the degree till we begin to understand this, becomes increasingly something that we are empowered to shape. So the Khenpo says, everything that appears in this world of samsara and nirvana definitely arises through the interdependence of causes and conditions. We never experience anything that does not depend on causes and conditions, such as a lotus in the sky. So lotuses in the sky, they just don't happen. If you're seeing a lotus in the sky, that's due to your own particular, you could say, wondrous karma that creates that. But a lotus actually doesn't grow in the sky. So that's where we understand phenomena don't just happen randomly. That's basically what we're saying. The great master Chandra Gorman, he says in the lamp of proven reasoning, phenomena are established as interdependent because they are pervaded by the factors of the nature, causal efficacy, dependency, and valid proofs. Whatever is shown and the means for showing it are established in this way. There is the nature, the act of production, and what is brought about. So this is where we see we can understand, and we can essentially be clear on what is happening with our reality, understanding their interdependent nature. Since all phenomena that are designated with names are interdependent, they are therefore emptiness. For interdependence to have the same meaning as equality, unconditioned phenomena must be included as well. So interdependence cannot be characterized solely as having arisen from causes. This means that this essentially being saying that what we call dependent arising is independent from, or sorry, inseparable from emptiness. And this comes back to the fact that when we say dependent arising, we are saying something that phenomena are conditioned. Everything is conditioned. When we say everything is conditioned, we obviously are making the point that phenomena are not unconditioned. They're not solid. Saying that phenomena are conditioned is saying that they're empty of an unchanging, unconditional essence. And this is not that hard to understand, but sometimes it can trip us up a little bit. But all we're really saying is that this web of phenomena exists as appearances, and yet we label these appearances without actually recognizing that their nature is free from anything that is unchanging, permanent, unitary, and so forth. So that's where we understand that when we say interdependence, dependent arising, praticca samutpada, at the same time we're also saying emptiness. Here, it is referred to as equality, but essentially what we mean with equality here is the nature that pervades samsara and nirvana. It's a little bit part of the Nyingma Dharma speak, but essentially it refers to the fact that the nature of reality is equal all across the board. Also, when we say bodhisattvas, they align themselves with this nature. We say they dwell in equanimity or they dwell in equality. So in that way, what we refer to as the conditioned phenomena, they also have, in that they are conditioned, there is this nature that is free from anything that we can grasp, that pervades all phenomena. And I'll admit it is a little bit confusing when we refer to then the absolute nature as being unconditioned. But we simply mean that that is that which is no longer, you could say, deceptive. While we are caught on the conditioned phenomena as being solid, that's where we're wrong. But when we free ourselves and not caught on this deception, that's when we are wise. And that's when we then are in touch with what is real, if you like. That absence of grasping at anything is what brings us into touch with what is real. And that we can then refer to as the unconditioned. Anyway, this will be explained. This is important. Believe me, I hope there's not anybody being sort of like, oh, can I just chant the Mani mantra? Of course, yes. But the value of just chanting the Mani mantra is exactly that it frees the mind. But for us to really appreciate the value of the Mani mantra, and for us to be able to relate to the world around us and challenge the assumptions, the misguided assumptions that are so pervasive in our world, it's very helpful to understand the value of what is behind. So that's where I hope, out of compassion for the world in which you live, and that you will embrace the study and actually understanding what it is that the Buddha is teaching. So please don't be overwhelmed by any of the material that we're covering here. It's not that hard, really. And feel free to write in questions. So Nagarjuna says, whatever arises interdependently is explained as emptiness. It is dependently designated. It is the path of the middle way. Meaning that the middle way here is, of course, sometimes we talk about the middle way as the Buddha going beyond the extremes of the palace indulgence and the extremes of asceticism. That's really just the middle way in terms of behavior. Middle way in terms of the view, and that's what we're talking about here, is the freedom from conceptual constructs. To understand that the way that we label phenomena is delusion, and to see beyond that, and to not hold on to concepts the way that we do. That's the middle way. So, like I said, whatever arises interdependently is explained as emptiness. It is dependently designated. It is the path of the middle way. Apart from what arises interdependently, there are no existent phenomena. And this is interesting. This we can see. There are no phenomena that arise. There are no phenomena that don't arise interdependently. Therefore, apart from emptiness, there are no existent phenomena. Hence, everything has that open dimension. The meaning of interdependence. Okay, a little bit of etymology coming up here. First, in Sanskrit, interdependent arising is praticca samutpada. Praticca samutpada is a term that we come across all along the lines of the various Buddhist traditions. The formation of words in 2 volumes state, this is, what is it again? Oh, it's an encyclopedia that was translated, Mahavutpyati or something like that. It's an Buddhist encyclopedia that was translated into Tibetan, and this is a commentary on that. Interdependent arising is praticca samutpada. Okay. Praticca is dependent or conditional. As for some, the word sambandha is related, so conditionally related. Utpada arises in conditional relationship. Neither outer phenomena nor inner phenomena arise independently. Things arise from the gathering of causes and conditions. Something arises later in dependence on an earlier cause, unless it is obstructed by something else. This is what is called interdependence. So we have the apple seed, and on the basis of the apple seed, then comes the apple sprout, unless something we maybe just keep the seed without giving it the necessary conditions, then it just the apple sprout doesn't happen. But otherwise, what we have is that from apple seed comes apple sprout, comes apple tree, come further apples, which again give rise to apple seeds again. So that's why everything arises like that. The glorious Chandrakirti says, that which arises as dependent and related is defining as coming together and connecting. So this means that everything that we experience really arises on the basis of the connection, connected phenomena that arise, the cause and the conditions that then give rise to phenomena. The point of this is to free us to understand greater openness, and that we're never stuck with one particular reality. That's what's so important. This is what brings about this openness and being less you could say gullible about our own projections and the labels that we give to phenomena. That's why it's so important, this insight. And this is what becomes the basis for the wisdom that is not caught up in the delusional solidification of phenomena. Interdependent arising doesn't mean, it doesn't, sometimes there's sort of a very sweet sort of idea that interdependence, well, you know, the cereal that I have here in my breakfast in the morning, it comes from the grain that was you know, harvested by the farmer who planted it in the ground, and you know, et cetera, et cetera. And in this way, everything is connected, and that's nice, and that's a lovely way. And I've seen this used a few places. It doesn't really have much to do with the Buddhist understanding of interdependence. The understanding of interdependence is to, let's say, free our mind for conceptual constructs, not sort of create new narratives, however sweet they are. And of course, it's very valid to do that, but it's not really what you find in the Buddhist teaching. But it is like I said, it's a very nice thing to think about. You know, we're all connected. You know, so we're connected with the farmer and the farmer's wife, and you know, all of that. That's wonderful, but it's I don't know who came up with this, but it's not really what we're talking about here. Let's see here. Okay, so I was saying that I was going over this in my dream, and somebody says, "Hi, in my dream I asked a really incisive comment. Such a shame it didn't play out in reality." Okay, given the unconditioned state of ultimate truth is beyond aspirational activity. That's right. That's right. We talk about the 3 doors of liberation. One of them is that this nature exists regardless of what we think about it. So it's not something that we hope for absolute truth. That's right. Yeah, that's so true. Given that the unconditional state of ultimate truth is beyond aspirational activity, I have difficulty in this moment understanding how then the Nirmanakaya arises with the purpose of teaching the Dharma and reconciling this with interdependent arising. Apologies for any current confusion. No, this is exactly the kind of what we want. Yes. Well, this is we're talking about the relative truth that sentient beings undergo. So sentient beings, they experience suffering. We talk about the Buddha having 2 wisdoms. One is understanding the unconditional and realizing the unconditional nature of reality. That's simply just, we call it Jitawa Kemba, the wisdom of knowing things as they are. But then there's Jinyepa Kemba, and that is knowing how things appear to others. And that's where the Buddha then, out of compassion, knowing that, just like when we're with a child that's having a nightmare, we know that everything the child might be experiencing in terms of fear and so forth is actually just hallucination. And so we know that everything is all right. But at the same time, also, we understand what the child is going through. And that's then where the Nirmanakaya comes in to the nightmare of sentient beings and teaches them, even though the Buddha knows that this is all just projection. Dependent origination makes total sense. The same with beginningless time. But my mind gets stuck on the generation of what appears to be physical material. There appears to be matter. I understand if they zoom in, there is only space. So why does space appear solid? Are all solid objects mere projection of mind? Yes. It's the mind that creates what we call qualia, all the perceptions of shapes, colors, and so forth. You know, it's interesting because physics comes up, neuroscience comes up with exactly the same questions, and they would say it's generated within the brain. So in fact, there's just a field out there that doesn't have anything to do with what we're seeing. And meanwhile, in the brain, there's this picture is being generated. In the Buddhist teaching, we talk slightly differently about things, and we talk about how we interact with the object of our senses, the sense faculties, and the consciousness that is generated on the basis of that. And that's where we can see that different individuals, of course, experience things differently. We talk about how the beings of the 6 realms see a glass of water differently, and so on. So we say then this is the mind, the alaya vijnana, where all our tendencies are stored, but then shapes, the perception, and the physical reality, again, is only as solid as our mind is habituated to it. So that's where we would say in the higher realms, there's more sort of a transparent quality to the experience that's less obscured. And in the lower realms, things are appear to be increasingly solid. And the sort of experience of self versus other is increasingly amplified. As in, are solid objects the result of thought? Yes, they're a result of thought in the sense of the basic delusion. So, of course, thought ordinarily is really just one of the six senses, the six consciousnesses. But what we are talking about here is then, you could say, mind at the deeper level of delusion. And that is where, again, we're distinguishing between mind and wisdom. And it's where wisdom is lost. That's what we call co-emergent ignorance. And that's where then we begin to generate this division between subject and object, and this and that. Is the 8 treasures of confidence equals the 8 minds of courage? Yeah, that's right. Actually, I've changed. By the way, I apologize once again. I forgot the invocation at the beginning, but I actually changed the wording in there to confidence. That makes more sense. So that's where it says, 8 mind. Oh, I thought I had changed it. What happened? What happened here? Hold on. Oh yeah, 8 minds of confidence. That's the old outdated one. What's that doing there? Get rid of that. There you go. New updated version in the translation of this application. Yeah. So anyway, so yes, that is the 8 minds of confidence. Hold on. So besides then, how to analyze our breakfast by true insight of Praticca Samutpada? But really just any given phenomena, as we're saying, is pervaded by dependent arising. That's the thing, whether it's our breakfast, dinner, whether it's ourselves, the people that we live with, our house, everything, all phenomena are dependent arisings. The Buddha knows. I also have trouble with the phrase which semantically creates the concept of a knower. Are we not seeking to drop even that? Yes, yes. But once we drop that, then there is a lack of confusion. And that's what we refer to as this wisdom that knows things as they are. Basically, we just say the wisdom that is not confused. Yeah, the lack of confusion. Basically, that's the Buddha's. We say the Buddha's wisdom. Mind is that related with relatives, and wisdom with the absolute. We can say that tentatively, yes. Yes, I mean, yes. Sometimes we use the word wisdom in various ways, but essentially the understanding of wisdom is that which is not entangled in confusion the way that mind ordinarily is. Okay, we can do a little bit more. There's a bit of time left. The essence of interdependence. Second, the essence of interdependence is that all phenomena, both outer and inner, do not arise without a cause. Things do not arise from a cause that is some other permanent creator, such as the Atman, time, or an almighty God like Ishvara. These are not causes. things are based on the coming together of their own interdependent causes and conditions, and so they are said to be interdependently arising. This we can verify for ourselves, whether it's our breakfast or any given phenomena. We could look at this watch here, and we can say, yes, that is not created by some external permanent creator. It's exactly by being put together, bolts and screws and all these kind of things, that constitute then this given phenomena that I label as a watch. The way that I'm labeling it has actually nothing to do with the phenomenon itself. It's just the way that I label it. Just like an ant would see this in a different way, etc., etc. So that's where we understand that we label phenomena in a particular way. But the way that phenomena arise, say this given phenomenon here, is due to a set of causes and conditions. This is very ordinary. But that's where we are, not saying this didn't just come about randomly. And also it's not something that is coming about due to a particular creator. Yeah? Okay. Now what we're going to go look at next is actually really, it's very beautiful. It's essentially, it refers to a sutra called the Rice Seedling. And in 84,000, this teaching, this sutra has been translated, and I put it up in the resources folder for our course. So we're going to be looking at essentially what this teaching is about, but it's actually, I'll just come back to our notes here. It's actually, the sutra itself begins like this. It says, thus have I heard at one time, once the Blessed One, is that what it says? Yes, the Bhagavan, thus have I heard. At one time, the Bhagavan was residing on Vulture Peak Mountain in Rajagriha with a large Sangha of 1,250 bhikkhus and with a great many Bodhisattva Mahasattvas. At that time, Venerable Shariputra went to the place frequented by the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Maitreya, and after they exchanged courtesies upon meeting each other, they both sat down on a flat rock. Venerable Shariputra then said to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Maitreya, Maitreya, here today, the Bhagavan, gazing at a rice seedling, a rice sprout, spoke these aphorisms to the bhikkhus. Bhikkhus, whoever sees dependent arising, sees the Dharma. Whoever sees the Dharma, sees the Buddha. Having said this, the Bhagavan fell silent. So what the Buddha is saying is, and this is then looking at this sprout, yeah, this rice sprout, that it's come from a seed, becomes a rice sprout, then becomes a rice plant. He says, and basically you could say taking that as a metaphor, as an image for dependent arising, it says, okay, when you understand dependent arising, then you'll understand the Dharma. You'll understand reality. Whoever understands reality understands or sees the Buddha. So in there then, on the basis of, again, Shariputra's questions, then in this case Maitreya, he expounds dependent arising, and he does it in two ways. He does it talking about the external world, and for example, a rice plant and so on, how it's dependent on the various conditions that bring about growth, and also talk about on the inner level how we come into existence on the basis of what we call the 12 links of dependent arising. And again, this is where it's helpful if you're following the Saturday study of Treasure of Precious Qualities. But anyway, I put some material up in the folder, resource folder about the 12 links, including the sutra also. And also what is very helpful, and I keep coming back to this one chapter from Trungpa Rinpoche's Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, and it is what we call the development of ego. It's called the development of ego. But that really enables us to understand what is the nature of this process that we're talking about when we talk about the 12 links or the 12 nidanas. How from ignorance we develop into an entity that then has a sense of identity that takes rebirth, that then lives a life and then dies, and then again the whole thing over again. So that's where we need to have, in order to study this, it's good if we can both have the classical context, which is the sutra here, and of course this will be also, unpacked by Khenpo Sherpa, but also very helpful to have a contemporary and equally, you could say, classical understanding, but presented in contemporary language within the modern idiom. That's where Trungpa Rinpoche's, ability to teach is just unparalleled, really. So, so that's what we're going to be looking at next time. In terms of then, you could say the categories of interdependence. First, the outer interdependence, about how a sprout comes about, and how this relates also to our experience of the 12 links of dependent arising, the inner interdependence. So we'll look at that next time. Thank you very much. If there's any questions. Oh, there's a few questions here. Okay. Dr. Khenpo Rinpoche gave a teaching on phenomena some time ago, helping to unwrap a big word. Rinpoche leaves no stone unturned to help. I have to listen to it again. Yeah, also last time Rinpoche taught on YouTube this talk on loneliness. He was talking about this, talking about loneliness. He was going right to the heart of the matter, really, is the understanding of self. And what is the basis for an assumption of self? And actually exposing how we think of self, but actually we cannot find anything that constitutes a real self. So yes, that's Rinpoche's very helpful. Now, but at no point is there division between seed and sprout, etc. Once again, they seem to be arbitrary definitions. Yes, because of course every little stage along the way could be labeled in one way or another. We roughly talk about the stage of seed, the stage of sprout, etc. Yeah. Got it. 8 treasures of confidence. Many thanks. Is having a strong affinity for the Dharma or recognizing the validity only a result of prior causes? Surely there's the first time someone encounters the wisdom and recognizes the truth. Yeah, that's true. That's true. We talk about the Buddha down in the hell realm, right? Where first time he ever had this moment of compassion, and actually he was out of the hell realm even then. And so yes, there might be a first time, but we generally just would say this is merit. So somehow we just might have the merit, and this could come about due to some, extraordinary circumstances. Like we had the story about the pig that was chased around the stupa by some dogs, and actually just this act of veneration of the stupa is said to have generated some merit, some connection. So that's why we talk about how connection is important. But actually this could create even just that first little spark that somehow, how in physics they sometimes talk about how the flapping of a butterfly wing can sort of eventually result in a tsunami, far away or whatever. So similarly also, a tidal wave or whatever. So that's where these little things, that's also why we sometimes would, with deceased animals, we whisper some mantras in their ears and so forth. When we analyze our breakfast by the insight of Pratisha Samuppada, we should not only say everything is interdependent, such as the grain, farmer, weather, etc., but we should reflect our perceptions labeled. Yes, we should really just understand that any given phenomenon arises on the basis of just, we're not talking about the production line here. That's the thing. You look at this phenomenon here, and you can see it's made up of many different parts. There's not anything in here that is the essence of what. Oof, very deep. Thank you. Hang in there. Things that appear deep, they eventually become very clear. Thank you, Jakob. it's a lot to take on board. Complex and counterintuitive to us Westerners until we think about it. Yeah, it's really just about us, investigating things, and that's where the Buddhist teaching is about a lot about where we've sort of misunderstood reality and created the delusion that we call samsara. So that's where sometimes our assumptions about things, if we look at them, we go beyond the appearance and we understand their complexity. And that's where we are less prone to label them in one particular way or another. In some way, it's counterintuitive, but also you could say what we're talking about here is really just openness, greater openness, opening our mind. And so anytime that we begin to consider complexity, we actually become more open. We tend to sort of just label things, good, bad. But the moment that we think, is it really good? Is it really bad? Then it opens us up. We become much nicer people. We become much more open. That's the beauty of this teaching here. So even though there are some, you could say, there's a lot of hard intelligence that goes into this, the result is also, greater openness. Just like if somebody's being impossible, we had to sit them down and say, no, it's not like that. Somebody says, I hate so-and-so, I'm going to punch them. We say, okay, but look, that person didn't mean it. We provide some hard reasoning. This person is, maybe were out of themselves when they did something you don't like. We talk them out of punching the other person, and then we're using, you could say, reasoning. We reason with them, we say, right? And so that's where we're not just in it for the philosophy, but really because it enables us to acquire greater openness. I know how empowering this teaching is. As empty, everything is empty, and the relative world is interdependent with our perception. We can really live a world of compassion and loving kindness through the diligent work to shift our perspectives. Thank you so much. Okay, well, may it come to be. Thank you. All right, that's dedicated. Okay. Through all our births, wherever we may be born, may we be endowed with the 7 good qualities of the higher realms. As soon as we're born, may we meet with the Dharma and have the freedom to practice it properly. At that time, may we please the Holy Gurus and practice the Dharma throughout the day and night. Realizing the Dharma and accomplishing its essential meaning, may we cross the ocean of existence in that life. Thoroughly teaching the Holy Dharma in this world, may we never tire of accomplishing the benefit of others, by this vast benefit of others, without partiality or bias. May all obtain Buddhahood. Thank you.